Good morning, everybody. Today is July 26th, 2020, and our state, our national leaders, they are still wrestling with how to safely and responsibly reopen our state, our schools, our economy. They're all trying. We are all trying to get back to some semblance of normalcy. You know, our leaders, they are actually under extraordinary pressure to lead. It is their privilege and their honor to lead, but it is also their duty and their responsibility to lead well. Not only that, consider that at any moment, at any time, a leader could make a mistake that could cost them everything. I mean, it's not hard to imagine, despite all of their authority, that with the slip of a tongue or just a careless move, a leader could do or say something that completely destroys their credibility and their confidence. Perhaps a scandal comes to light, an old tweet resurfaces, or unfounded accusations from an enemy. You know, and any moment this could happen. And in these moments we know, and they know, that their hopes for the future are doomed. I mean, their chances for renewal or re-election, they're gone. They're toast. And they have lost the respect of those that they lead. In fact, if it's bad enough, they might actually be removed from office, from leadership. And when these moments happen, these events, these scandals, they surface or whatever, we may say of them, the writing is on the wall. Right? The writing is on the wall. Maybe you've heard of this idiom. It is an old one. It basically means an ominous omen or a very clear sign that something bad is going to happen soon. Right? The writing is on the wall. And this idiom, of course, it comes from our story today in Daniel chapter 5. In this story, that the king of Babylon, he makes a fatal mistake, a stupid mistake, which not only costs him his kingdom, but also his life. And this king, we'll see today, he was the first leader to literally see the writing on the wall. He literally made this fatal mistake. And so last week, we were in Daniel chapter 3. We saw King Nebuchadnezzar. He was building this giant statue and this idol of sorts. And because Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego, they would not bow to it. They would not pray to it to honor him. Instead, they were thrown into the fiery pit, right? The fiery furnace. Right? And we saw how God was with them in the midst of the fire. And God delivered them. God delivered them out of the fiery furnace. And unexpectedly, at the end of that chapter, we even saw King Nebuchadnezzar. Right? He glorified God because of what he had seen. So that was the end of chapter 3. We're going to skip chapter 4. In chapter 4, King Nebuchadnezzar, he again has another strange dream, and he loses his mind. He goes a little crazy, but by the end of the chapter, he praises God. Right? And he recognizes that God is really sovereign. God is in control. And at this point, it seems like he has learned his lesson. Okay, and this is how chapter 4 ends. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and honor and extol and honor the King of heaven. For all his works are right, and his ways are just, and those who walk in pride he is able to humble. Okay, so King Nebuchadnezzar, he seems to have learned his lesson now. Finally. And several years have passed between chapter 4 and chapter 5, which we'll be looking at today. Okay, several years have passed. King Nebuchadnezzar, he is long gone. And just based off the chronology, okay, Daniel and his friends, they were originally brought to Babylon in about 605 BC. And the events of today's passage, it talks about the end of Babylon, the end of the Babylonian Empire in 539 BC. Okay, so we're talking about a period of about a little under 70 years that Babylon is in power. Babylon is ruling. And from the historical records, we know that at this time, the ruler of Babylon is no longer Nebuchadnezzar. His name is King Nabonidus. Okay, these are the dates that he ruled. And the thing is, he was the king, but he moved his royal residence to a different place, a different part of the empire, Teman, southeast of Eden. And so he wasn't really living in the capital city. And instead, he left his son, Belshazzar, in charge. King Belshazzar served as his vice regent. He kind of ruled Babylon proper from the city of Babylon. And so, for all intents and purposes, the Jews in captivity, they would have said that Belshazzar was king. Okay, so this is just going to explain who's in power at this point. And now we can finally get to Daniel chapter 5, verse 1. King Belshazzar made a great feast for 1,000 of his lords and drank wine in front of the 1,000. Belshazzar, when he tasted the wine, commanded that the vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar his father had taken out of the temple in Jerusalem be brought, and that the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. Then they brought in the golden vessels that had been taken out of the temple, the house of God, in Jerusalem. And the king and his lords, his wives, and his concubines drank from them. They drank wine and praised the gods of gold and silver, bronze, iron, wood, and stone. So chapter 5 begins with a king, right? King Belshazzar, whom I talked about earlier. And he's holding this great feast. And the way that this is told, it's meant to evoke a sense of extravagance, of splendor. Right? It says that he's holding this feast for 1,000 of his lords, right? And he drank wine in front of the 1,000. Imagine like a giant kegger, a giant, just a huge frat party, right? And it's the king and his cronies. They're just pounding it, right? They are there and they are just pounding it. In verse 2, it says that when he tasted the wine, right? No, he's not just tasting it, okay? He's pounding it. This is a euphemism for when he got really, really, really drunk. Okay, he's drunk. And he's partying, he's having a good time, he's enjoying the revelry, and in his drunkenness, this is when he makes his fatal mistake. Right? Servants, bring out those cups and goblets. I've seen them sitting in the temple, untouched. Right? We're going to eat, we are going to drink, we are going to be merry. Now bring them out now, he says. Bring them out. Let us drink. Now, why is this such a big no-no? Why is this such a big deal? We're not just talking about using the wrong drinking vessels. We're not just talking about getting them dirty or maybe a little chipped or anything like that. That's not the main issue here. What King Belshazzar has done is actually sacrilegious. Okay, so let me explain that. Apparently in the ancient Near East, when they were at war, when one nation would conquer another nation, they would take the vessels out of the temple of that god and put it in their own. Okay, and that was a sign of domination. It was a sign that the Babylonian gods were stronger, more powerful than the God of that nation, that puny nation that they had just conquered. And we see this actually in Daniel chapter 1, verse 2. This is what Nebuchadnezzar did. He took those holy vessels and put it in his the gods, the temple of his own gods. But when they did this, there was still some respect that was shown to these holy vessels. There was still an understanding that these vessels, they were holy. They belonged in a temple. They were still shown this respect. But to use those vessels, those religious goblets or priestly cups, to use them for drinking and partying, this was a sign of deep disrespect. This was a sign of deep, deep, deep disrespect. Imagine if someone went and took the cross down from our sanctuary. Okay. They took the cross down and they started using it to plunge toilets. Or imagine if someone took the Holy Bible, the Holy Bible that we have sitting on our altar, and they just took it with them into the bathroom and they started ripping out the pages and using it as toilet paper. That is the level of disrespect for what King Belshazzar has done. And he is essentially saying, this puny God of the Jews, he means nothing to me. These Judeans, they mean nothing to me, and I will do with them however I please. I will do with them however I please. They are there for my pleasure. And so now we understand a little bit more what this fatal mistake was. His mortal sin. It was pride. It was arrogance. We too, we have that same fatal flaw in us, don't we? Pride and arrogance. We do what we want, when we want, how we want to. Like Burger King, the motto of our generation is, have it your way. Have it your way. Do whatever you want. Have it your way. It's all about you. And in a sense, we are all kings of our own little kingdoms. We have so many choices. We have become consumers with the power to choose. We have a million different choices. I'm bored of my job. I'm sick of my boss. I will just put my resume up on the internet. Or, I don't like how this pastor preaches. I will go to another church. That is my choice. Or how about this one? We're not really ready to be parents right now. So I am pro-choice. It is my choice whether or not to have this baby. And really at the core of it is pride. We think we deserve better. We deserve more. We think we have the right to shape our lives, our world, to be how we see fit. Have it your way. I will have it my way. And really, we fall into the same trap as Belshazzar. I am king. I will do as I please. Verse 5. Immediately the fingers of a human hand appeared and wrote on the plaster of the wall of the king's palace opposite the lampstand. And the king saw the hand as it wrote. Then the king's color changed and his thoughts alarmed him. His limbs gave way and his knees knocked together. The king called loudly to bring in the enchanters, the Chaldeans, and the astrologers. the king declared to the wise men of Babylon, "Whoever reads this writing and shows me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and shall be the third ruler in the kingdom." Then all the king's wise men came in, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king the interpretation. Then King Belshazzar was greatly alarmed, and his color changed, and his lords were perplexed. So right here we see the immediate consequence of Belshazzar's foolish action. Imagine a ghostly, dismembered human hand just floating in the air. And then this writing slowly appearing on the wall. Mene, Mene. Tekel. And Perez. And although King Belshazzar could not understand it, he clearly realizes that this is a message intended for him. And he knows in his spirit, in his gut, he just knows that this is not good news. He has made a fatal mistake. And so he calls for all his wise men, right? And they too cannot decipher the writing. They too cannot understand the writing on the wall. Now, just a little note on the fingers of a human hand. What might this mean? What besides what it literally looked like? I mean, it literally looked like the fingers of a human hand. But what else might it mean? What else might it refer to? This may be a reference to the finger of God in the story of Exodus. In the story of Exodus, at that time, the Hebrews, they were in captivity, and Moses and Aaron, they were sent to convince Pharaoh to let the Hebrews go. And Moses and Aaron, they are given these miraculous signs. Right? Aaron's staff, it turns into a snake. And they turn the water of the Nile into blood. Right? But Pharaoh, he's unconvinced. He's unconvinced by these signs because his magicians and his sorcerers, they are able to replicate these signs. And in Exodus 8, Moses and Aaron, they send this plague of gnats upon Egypt. Gnats, right? And the magicians tried by their secret arts to produce gnats, but they could not. So there were gnats on man and beast. Then the magicians said to Pharaoh, "This is the finger of God." But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them, as the Lord had said. And so here in this story also, we see that the wisdom of men fail to replicate or understand the wisdom, the power of God. Right? They acknowledge it, but they acknowledge that it is something that they cannot do. And so back to King Belshazzar, right? We see him, he turns white as if he's seen a ghost, and he just literally, all his strength melts away. Right? And he's just anxious, he's worried, he's freaking out a little bit, and he's perplexed, and he's seeking answers. But none of the wise men could read the writing or help him to understand what it means. Until finally, later on in the story, the queen mother, she says, "I know of a man who served your father, your predecessor, King Nebuchadnezzar. I know of this man, and his name is Daniel. His name is Daniel. And in him is the Spirit of the Holy God. And he will tell you what this means." And the king says, "Okay, go. Send for him." send for him. And if he can do what you say, then I will give him riches and honor, and I will make him third in the kingdom, only under my father and myself. He will be third in the kingdom. Okay? Verse 17. Then Daniel answered and said before the king, let your gifts be for yourself. Give your rewards to another. Nevertheless, I will read the writing to the king and make known to him the interpretation. O king, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father kingship, and greatness, and glory, and majesty. And because of the greatness that he gave him, all peoples, nations, and languages trembled and feared before him. Whom he would, he killed, and whom he would, he kept alive. Whom he would, he raised up, and whom he would, he humbled. So here Daniel recounts that it was Yahweh, it was God, the Most High God, who gave Nebuchadnezzar his glory and his power, who made him the golden head of this empire, right? But when Nebuchadnezzar's heart was lifted up and his spirit was hardened so that he dealt proudly, he was brought down from his kingly throne and his glory was taken from him. And you, his son, Belshazzar, have not humbled your heart, though you knew all this, but you have lifted up yourself against the Lord of heaven. You, Belshazzar, you have acted proudly and arrogantly and foolishly, as your father once did. But you have not learned his lesson. You have not learned his humility. And now, the God of gods, the Lord of lords, the King of kings, he will now humble you as well. So this is Daniel's build-up. This is what he says to the king. And this is the writing that was inscribed. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Parsin, or Perez. Finally, we see this is the interpretation of the matter. Mene. God has numbered the days of your kingdom and brought it to an end. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balances and found wanting. Perez, your kingdom is divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. Okay, Perez and Parsin, they're just alternate forms of the same word. And so finally, we see the writing on the wall that had so perplexed, so disturbed the king and his wise men. Now, each of these words was literally a measure of weight, of wealth. It was of coinage. But there's also much more going on. There's also a bit of wordplay involved here. Okay, so I'm going to explain a little bit. So Mene. This literally means numbered or accounted for. Okay, this word literally means numbered. And this is where we get the word mina from. A mina is a type of coin. It is worth quite a bit. Remember Jesus' parable in Luke chapter 19? There's a story of a king who has 10 minas, who entrusted these 10 minas to his servants. And you can go and look at that story. But a mina was quite a bit of money. And this word that is written on the wall twice, it's meant to evoke that. We are to understand that God has entrusted Belshazzar with much. But it has all been carefully numbered and accounted for. Okay? It is all carefully numbered and accounted for. mene. And now the second word, tekel. Tekel. This is again a measurement of weight. Money weight. Money changers and bankers, they would weigh coinage and precious metals. Tekel. And this is actually where we get the word shekel. A shekel was about 7 to 11 grams of silver. A shekel was a pretty typical payment for laborers in the field. Some scholars believe that Judas Iscariot actually sold out Jesus Christ for 30 shekels of silver. Okay. And again, this was a measurement of weight. And the last one, Perez. This last word was again a term of commerce. It meant to divide, to split something in half or otherwise. And the pun is that this word, Perez, or in plural, parsin, it sounds awfully similar to the Aramaic word for Persia. Perez, Persia, I guess, Persia. And so, on first glance, these words seem kind of nonsensical. I mean, they're just different denominations of coinage. Like if I said to you, penny, nickel, dime, and I expected you to kind of understand what that meant. Penny, nickel, dime. But Daniel sees these words, and he understands what they mean, and he explains the deeper meaning behind it. And this is it. Here's the message. That due to Babylon's pride, God will end its rule and give it to the Persians. Right? Your days are numbered. And what you have done is not fair. It's not just. And so, your kingdom will be split. You will be cut off. And it will be given to the Persians. Now, this isn't really a new message at all. In fact, remember 2 weeks ago we talked about Nebuchadnezzar's dream of that statue, and it had these different parts to it, and Daniel had already explained what the dream, what the statue signified. It basically means that no kingdom on earth lasts forever. There will always be another. The fall of Babylon was prophesied way back when we looked at Habakkuk. Even before they had come to power, God had already said, yeah, I will allow them to rule for a little while, but then I will judge them. Right? The fall of Babylon was also prophesied in Jeremiah chapter 50, 100 years before. Right? They were doomed from the start because God knew that they were sinful, they were prideful, they were arrogant of heart. Verse 30, that very night, Belshazzar the Chaldean king was killed, and Darius the Mede received the kingdom being about 62 years old. And so at the end of the chapter here we see that it comes to pass that very night. And the Babylonian Empire ends, and the Medo-Persian Empire begins. And as God said it, God willed it, and God did it. It came to pass that very night. Now, so what? So what? What does Babylon and kings and ancient history have to do with me? Well, a lot, actually. The way that God dealt with the proud back then is the same way he deals with the prideful today, right now. Those who boast in their power, those who trust in their riches, like the rich fool in Luke chapter 12. Jesus again told another story of a rich fool in Luke chapter 12. And he had barns full of grain. And he had a house full of riches and goods. Like that rich fool, God may say to us at any time, "Fool, this night, this very night, your soul is required of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?" What good is all that? All the blessings that you have, even the blessings that God has given you, the resources, your talents, the time that He has given you. What have they been for? What have they been used for? For honoring ourselves or honoring God? Is He truly the king? Or do we just want to have it our way? Have it your way? Babylon lives on in the spirit of pridefulness and worldly power. Governments, empires, corporations, evil men who will take without giving, who will lift themselves up by putting others down, who boast without honoring God. These three words, this same message applies to them. God has numbered their days, and their judgment is coming. Their judgment is coming. In the book of Revelation, chapter 18, an angel, he cries out in a mighty voice. And this is what he says. "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place for demons, a haunt for every unclean spirit. For her sins are heaped high as heaven, and God has remembered her iniquities. She glorified herself and lived in luxury. So give her a like measure of torment and mourning. For this reason her plagues will come in a single day, death and mourning and famine, and she will be burned up with fire. For mighty is the Lord God who has judged her." God will judge all who act like Babylon, all who act like Belshazzar, all those who do not humble themselves before Him. God will judge. So, brothers and sisters, do not make that same fatal mistake. Heed the writing on the wall. Heed the writing on the wall. God humbles the proud, but He raises up the lowly. Nebuchadnezzar learned this through much suffering and pain. Let us heed the writing on the wall. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. I want to thank everybody for sticking around with us during these strange times. Thank you for continuing to support us. We'd also like to ask for your help. Myself and the other leaders, we are trying to determine how comfortable you would be in returning to church, to meeting in person again when we hit phase 3. And so if you could help us out by just doing a quick 1 to 2 minutes, that's all it is, 1 to 2 minute survey. You will find the link below this video, or you can go to the direct address, en.ecc-skc.org/home/survey_en. Please try and fill it out by the end of the week, August 1st. That would really help us out. Again, we are here to serve you, And we just want to know how comfortable, what are some of your concerns regarding meeting back in person again. So God bless you all. Take care.